Hi everyone, Armoured Pants here, and I have a brand new video for you on a brand new tank, the spanking new T26E3 Eagle 7, which is in the stores right now. And it's in the stores for 10,000 gold, fully equipped. But I think that's probably a bit pricey for a tier 7 medium. It's around €32, which is what, 36, 37 bucks, or 28 quid in the UK. And when you consider that the K91 offer was about €25 just a few weeks ago, and that's a tier 9 premium, it does seem a bit pricey. But nonetheless, we'll have a look at the tech spec, we'll have a look at, all of the details. Because it's interesting, because this tank is kind of a Frankenstein's monster of a tank. There's bits and pieces of things thrown together, the Pershing, the T26E3, the T20, etc. But we'll have a look at blitzhanger.com and we'll get all of the info there. So firstly, this is a decent medium tank, right? There's nothing special, it's not particularly bad, it's not particularly good, it's just decent. In terms of the provisions, I would use Coke, a case of Coke, and improved fuel to max out the performance. I'd stay away from the enhanced armor. You don't really sandbag armor, whatever. You don't really need that. It has a 90mm gun, which is kind of standard on these American mediums, and 6.4 second reload if you use gun rammer, 6.9 if you use calibrated shells. So the reload is okay. And in terms of pen, you get 160mm or 168 if you use calibrated shells, and your Pramo, which is another AP round, it's not APCR, is 202 versus 212 if you use calibrated shells, and HE is 45 or 50 depending on whether you use calibrated shells or not. And muzzle velocity on the HE shells is a bit lower, it's 1070 meters per second, but not significantly lower. That's going to make too much of a difference in terms of gun handling. 10 degrees of gun depression, 20 degrees of elevation means that this tank actually has excellent gun alignment. Now, in terms of its gun index, it's 9.9k or 9.9s, which is very good for a tier 7 medium tank, and we'll have a look at why that is later on. But this tank, it needs that good gun index because its pen is not great with a 90mm gun. Now, on the downside, its power to weight ratio sucks. It is truly awful, and that's quite characteristic of many American medium tanks. We don't really know why, given the size of the engines that put into them. The reverse also sucks. It's just awful as well. And that really leads to a very, very low maneuverability or mobility index. And we're going to have a look at that later on when we look at how to play this tank. Now, in terms of concealment, at 302 meter view range, you basically, the tank needs to get in within almost 240 meters of you, 252 when moving. So basically, it's not great. A tank with 302 meter view range is going to spot you up relatively easy. So you need to be careful if you're using it for spotting or scouting, and particularly if there's a light tank with a high view range on the other team, you need to be very cautious because the concealment numbers are not great. But what is good about this tank is its turret. So it has this huge gun mantle which takes up most of the turret. It has this 10 degrees of gun depression we spoke about, which basically means that you can go hull down on this tank. Now, the hull down ability of this tank basically means that it offers configuration choices, and we're going to look at those later on too. I'm actually going to have a look at the in-game setup on this tank because I think it's quite important, because there's two different ways as I see it to play this tank. I'll do my best to explain that to you later on when we look at this in-game setup. Now, back to the armor. I think, looking at the armor there, if you look at the relative armor numbers on the side, you can actually side scrape in this tank. It has some frontal armor as well, unlike the T26E3. But the turret armor is great, and that big gun mantlet means that it is ideal for going hull down. So if you want to go hull down and be a hull down sniper in this tank, that is definitely one option. If you look at the tank, and you can see that it does have some armor, unlike the T26E3, which is one of its direct equivalents, the other T7 premium American medium tank. When you're up tiered, of course, you're going to suffer a bit, but nonetheless, it's still very difficult, even if you're even for tier 8 tanks, to pen that turret because there's such a small target to aim at. Now, in terms of tactics for this tank, they're very much dependent on how you set the tank up. So I'm messing around with the configuration a lot, and I'm going to share this with you in the hope that I can maybe use the experience of messing around with this for hours yesterday and today to maybe save you some of that pain and enable you to play the tank a bit better. Now, one thing about it is it only does 225 plus damage points, right? So it has low alpha rolls, particularly when you consider that if you use calibrated shells, it's going to go up to almost a 7-second reload, right? So it's pretty low, right? And its maneuverability index, its mobility index is only 4.65. It's also very low, right? But of course we know it's typical of American medium tanks because of that power to weight ratio, and the traverse in particular suck. Now, so what does this mean? Well, it means it's difficult to play this as a normal medium tank as you wouldn't a standard medium tank play, right? Because it's difficult to get around the map and it's difficult to get to places quickly. However, you can actually resolve that by using this extra engine accelerator. So it has this option. If you use this extra engine accelerator and use the equipment, the consumable loadout as I have here, this actually can be played effectively as a medium tank, and you'll see that in the gameplay. But I would also set up the equipment differently then as well. So what I would do then is I would actually run the equipment slightly differently. We'll have a look at that in a second. By the way, if you're running that additional engine accelerator, I would run 2 repair kits, and you have to lose adrenaline to do that. Now, here's the setup if you're going to play it as a medium. In terms of combat power, I would go for supercharge, but I'd use vertical stabilizer and I'd use gun rammer. Because basically the vertical stabilizer is important when you're shooting, when you're moving, and that's a key asset, a key facet as well of when you're playing a medium tank. If you're going to go as a hold down sniper, then you actually, I would set it up maybe even like this. So basically use calibrated shell, supercharge, and then I would use refined gun because you want to reduce the dispersion, because you're going to be not moving a lot when you're firing if you're going to be a hold down sniper. So therefore this is also another option that you could think about. If you are going to be hold down sniper, you can still use that extra engine accelerator, but it's not as important, so maybe you want to take adrenaline instead. So just some setup options to think about, guys. Now in the game we're going to look at, it's on Normandy, and I have it set up as a medium tank, so basically the first specification that we looked at in terms of equipment. And you can see here that I have chosen 2 repair kits and the extra engine accelerator. And you're going to see here when I take off from the start. Now originally I was going to go hold down and go towards B, but then this game is about communication. And you see the Ag Panther saying, like, please everybody go towards C. So, okay, I'm a good team player, so I'm going to go towards C. Now look at the difference this engine accelerator makes. I mean, this thing just takes off. It's like shit off a shovel when you have this extra engine accelerator. And look how quickly I get to C. I'm in C straight away. I'm in D, apologies. I'm in D straight away, and I'm capturing that before any of the enemies started capturing C. Now they're capturing it more quickly because there's more of them there, but I got a significant advantage in getting to a key position on the map using this. I also, when using consumables, I also always select to use them more frequently. In particular, when you have single-use consumables, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you use a repair kit, it doesn't matter if it lasts 20 or 15 seconds. What matters is how frequently you can use it, right? So it makes sense, right? Now you can see here the gun depression in action, able to get a nice shot onto that WZ. By the way, I get through this whole game without taking any damage. Now here's the gun handling in action. It has good gun handling, we saw that. And you can see here, when you're on a lower tier tank like this, you're going to pen. If that was on a tier A tank destroyer, particularly one of the Chinese ones, would have been much more difficult to pen. I slowed this down right here because when I was live in game, I had no fucking clue how I missed that shot. But in actuality, when I slow it down, I think it fired over the back of the Dracula. And that just shows how fast those fucking things are. But no mistake on the second shot. Now again, I am in a good position here, right, because I am utilizing the hold down abilities of this tank. And now we're also going to see the armor in effect. So I fire, roll back, and we can see here how superior the armor is on this to the T26E3, which is a tank which is very, very similar to. you would not have gotten that bounce on the T26E3. So there is a bit of forgiveness. Again, good gun alignment there in action, good gun index. Nice shot again on the SU-100. Now, here you're going to see an example of why, and again another bounce there. You can see this tank is armored well. I bounced right off the mantlet. Now, as I was about to say, here you're going to see a good example of why, if you're playing as a medium tank and not going to be sniping from distance, and I would recommend playing as a medium tank, it's much more fun, is why you need to run vertical stabilizer. Because of shots like this, you probably would not have made this shot if you weren't running vertical stabilizer, because your shots when moving are not as accurate. So if you're running if you're running refined gun rather than vertical stabilizer, you would have, I'm not saying you wouldn't have made it, but you would have had less chance of making it in those circumstances. Again, this is this extra additional engine accelerator in action here. You see how easily I was able to move up and down those hills, get around the black prints, and that's that extra engine accelerator in place. It transforms the maneuverability and mobility of this tank so much. It's like driving a different tank. So and it definitely that's a consumable that I would run if I was playing this. Now there you go, almost 2.7, almost 2.8k of damage, which is pretty good when you consider the low alpha rolls that you have in this tank. A good example of this tank being played as a medium tank. A good example, I think, of the equipment loadout and also the consumables loadout, which I recommend. Look, guys, this is just my opinion, but you know, I always like to look at the stats. I always like to see how they affect tanks differently. I always like to see how equipment loadouts etc. work, and this is my result of messing around with this fucking thing for hours. So hopefully you will also find it useful, and it will help you guys enjoy this tank a bit better, should you decide to buy it, of course, and you may not, because it is quite expensive. So let's have a recap on the key aspects of this tank. Now, it is a decent premium tank. From what I believe, it has 156% credit coefficient, which makes it around 4th in the tier 7 in terms of premium tanks, which is not bad. It's an adequate medium tank. I mean, it's not bad, it's not good. I mean, you wouldn't say this is an OP tank by any stretch of the imagination. You also wouldn't say it's a shit box. It's not. It's just adequate. 90mm gun does struggle a bit, especially if you're up tiered. I mean, if you're up tiered, trying to pen an IS-6 or somewhere like big, get a lot of armor on the front of it is going to be difficult. You got low alpha rolls as well, particularly when you consider that it has a 6.4 second reload. It's or goes up to 6.9 if you use calibrated shells. It's quite long for such low alpha rolls. But there are different setups available in this tank for the different roles. And if you want to play it as a standard medium, doing medium tank things, and I would set it up as we looked at earlier. You know, and there's also unusual optimal consumables, I think, that work, and that extra engine accelerator, 2 repair kits, and not using adrenaline, which goes against my normal sort of setup, I think works best with this, because that improved engine power boost is just awesome. It transforms the tank's mobility completely, and in that 15 seconds the tank is actually really nippy and agile. But you know, it is a decent tank. It's okay, just adequate, but for 10,000 gold I think it's a bit pricey, and I think it's nice to have. It's not a must have or need to have tank. So you know, only if you've got significant amount of cash spare and you really love your collectible and premium tanks, I would consider getting this. Otherwise, you know, it's not necessary, and I would give it a miss. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it enjoyable, and I guess all that remains for me to say is pants off.